So Russian logistics are really in a bad spot right now. In fact, they're probably in a worse state now than they were at the beginning of the war when we saw that 40-kilometer long convoy. And you may ask, well, what could be worse than a 40-kilometer long convoy that is stuck in the mud essentially? Well, honestly, not having convoys at all because there simply aren't enough fuel supplies moving to the front line en masse required to sustain this fight, nor do the Russians have the proper equipment tactically to move those supplies to where they need to go. The problem is so bad that they're actually forcing soldiers to march some 30 kilometers from rear echelon nodes to the front line because of a combined fear of equipment destruction and just a lack of transport capability. Now, the reason this is happening is because Ukraine has expanded its attritional fight to include sustained strikes against Russian fuel ports and rail nodes. The Reuters refinery tracker shows drones knocked out roughly 20% of Russia's refining capability in August, taking 1.4 million barrels per day offline. That pushed Moscow to extend a gasoline export ban and impose a partial diesel export ban through late 2025 to stabilize domestic shortages. I mean, we're seeing fuel lines across Russia, which is almost unheard of for an energy producing nation like Russia. These strikes are also impacting countries that support Russia, including Kazakhstan, which had to stop shipping fuel to Russia after the Gazprom Orenburg processing complex was damaged. It's also creating mobility bottlenecks on the front line because without a steady stream of fuel and lubricants, the operational tempo stalls, even if they still have the ammunition to fire. Crimea keeps taking hits as well. Ukraine struck the Fedosia Marine Oil Terminal twice in October, destroying 11 of its 16 fuel tanks. We're also seeing huge lines on the Kerch Bridge because of inspections and repairs that are underway. This is snarling up road logistics into Crimea. Even though the rail line across the bridge was repaired, Ukraine is striking rail logistics hubs in the rear, slowing those shipments significantly as well. At sea, the Black Sea Fleet has been pushed out of Sevastopol in Crimea to Novorossiysk after cumulative missile and uncrewed surface vessel attacks. The Royal United Services Institute estimates the fleet has lost about one-third of its combat power. Now, Novorossiysk itself is under pressure from record storms as well as the continued Ukrainian drone threat, making Russian sea lift completely unreliable. Now, one caveat to all of this is that Russia still has plenty of ammunition. Unfortunately, they produce a good chunk of it themselves and have also received around 64 container loads of munition containing roughly 4 to 6 million shells from North Korea. That's enough to cushion their artillery needs, even as fuel and transport capabilities fall apart. So, what Russia is now doing is prioritizing the movement of this ammunition to the front line using their lift capabilities, and it's actually impacting other things like medical and casualty evacuation, providing food and water to the front line. This has led to soldiers trying to find water on their own and has caused sickness throughout the ranks. And because modern militaries need fuel, Ukraine is focusing on that. They're not trying to strike ammunition plants so much. They're hurting the fuel logistics hubs, not only to slow frontline efforts, but also make it painful on the average Russian. Now, the problem here for Russia is that if refinery downtime stays near the 20% range and export bans persist, especially with Trump layering on additional sanctions just over the last day or so, the revenue from those fuel sales is going to drop, and it's going to also impact the front line. Russia is feverishly trying to rebuild the Mariupol to Berdyansk rail line, but rail lines are static targets, and Ukraine has shown it can find and hit those nodes quite easily. So there's really no way out of this for Russia other than to just stop the war, to leave. It's going to get more and more painful on the Russian military as well as the average Russian civilian. They're going to keep bleeding energy and refining capability, which is the lifeblood of their country. It's legitimately the only reason they have any power on the global stage, and that is exactly why Ukraine is smartly striking that capability.